Welcome to The Middle. I'm Jeremy Hobson, along with our house DJ Tolliver. And Tolliver, I feel like I'm saying this every week now, but there is so much happening. I almost thought about starting a second middle each week to get to it.
You should, man. I'm so down. That sounds good to me. Listen, man, I can't handle all the news. I'm going full ostrich this year. Okay, head in the sand.
Head in the sand.
Coming up for barbecues. That's it.
All right. Okay. Well, I think what you have to do in a moment like this is not get overwhelmed. Just focus on one thing at a time, and that's what we're going to do. And our one thing this week is the Middle East. For decades now, the U.S. role in and relationship with countries in the Middle East has dominated our foreign policy. U.S. soldiers have fought wars in the region, and the conflict between Israelis and Palestinians clearly had a meaningful effect on our election here in this country in November. So this hour, we're going to be taking your questions about what's happening across the Middle East and what it means for the United States and the world with a very special guest. We have the former president of Iraq, Barham Saleh, who was president from 2018 to 2022 with us. You can call in and ask your questions at 844-4MIDDLE. That's 844-464-3353, and we'll get to your questions in just a moment. But first, last week, we asked you about your thoughts on Trump's deportation policy that's now underway. A lot of voicemails came in from people who didn't make it on the air during the show. Here are some of them.
My name's Marilee Davidson. I live in Salt Lake City, Utah. These illegal people are really here to work really hard. Yes, there are criminals, and I agree that they should be taken out of here. I don't think anyone should be above the law. But I'd like to point out that we have a person in the presidency who has been convicted by a jury of his peers for 34 felonies. That's ridiculous.
Hi, my name is Len. I'm in Elm Grove, Wisconsin. Immigrants, illegal and otherwise, pay sales taxes, income taxes, FICA taxes, property taxes, and they work. We need these people for the growth and strength of our economy and our retirement systems.
Hi, my name is Haya from Ohio. When it comes to immigration, it's not that we can't make a huge difference in it. It's just that the rhetoric revs people up emotionally instead of being practical and handling the problem in a beneficial way for everybody.
Well, thanks to everyone who called in. You can hear that entire episode on our podcast in partnership with iHeart Podcasts on the iHeart app or wherever you listen to podcasts. So now to our topic this hour, the Middle East. What questions do you have about what's happening in Israel, Gaza, Syria, Iran, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Turkey, etc.? Tolliver, can you give us the phone number again, please?
Yeah, it's 844-4MIDDLE. That's 844-464-3353. Or you can write to us at listentothemiddle.com. And you can also comment on our live stream on YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitch.
Joining us for the hour is the former president of Iraq, Barham Saleh. Mr. President, welcome to The Middle.
Thank you for having me, Jeremy.
It's great to have you. And before we get to the phones, just so that people know, you are from Kurdistan in the northern part of Iraq, which is a semi-autonomous region, but you were also the president of all of Iraq. There are many Americans, maybe some listening, who served in Iraq or had family members who did. How would you describe the country now? Is democracy working in Iraq?
Well, first and foremost, it's great to be with you. And to those who have served in Iraq and those who have had direct connections with the transition in Iraq from 2003 and onward, I want to say thank you for the help that was rendered to the people of Iraq to get rid of the dictatorship of Saddam Hussein. I know this issue has been most contentious in this country, and many people in this country have been debating and discussing whether it was the right decision or not. But let me tell you from our perspective in Iraq, and when I say our perspective, certainly the majority of Iraqis were grateful to see the dictatorship of Saddam Hussein removed. 2003 could not have happened without the intervention of the United States and the commitment of this country, as well as the many people who have really come and served there, and so many who have paid with their lives in order to accomplish that mission. Not to talk about also the effort of the United States to help us defeat terrorism in the period after that. Having said that, I would say that Iraq is today not the spectacular success that we all hoped for and that Iraqis deserved and our friends in the United States and the coalition partners have worked for. But it is also not the terrible disaster that some people want to depict it as. It's a mixed bag. And just a point to be putting things in context. Since 2003, we have had 6 governments change through at least a quasi-democratic process elections, adhering to basic constitutional standards. And this is in the heart of the Islamic Middle East, which usually governments change by brute force, by coups, by violence, and so on.
Well, let me ask you about that, because you did something that was very unusual in the Middle East, which is you actually peacefully transferred power to your successor.
That is the law of the land. That is the law of the land. That's the constitution. And I did not end up in the gallows as well, with the gallows. I mean, this is also for me to be able to speak to you like this, even though as president, I used to be a critic of our system. I spoke my mind when I was president, because the system, again, in this context of this conversation with you, probably I will point to many of the positive things that have happened in Iraq since 2003, but I do not lose sight of the many setbacks that Iraqis have suffered and the disappointments that Iraqis feel about the process. When I was president, I used to focus on the negatives and trying to improve on what we need to do. But this is a messy process, transitions in a country that has been ruled by dictatorship forever, living in that tough neighborhood where we have neighbors, each with a stake in what was going on in our country. That transition has not been easy, I have to say. A lot of unnecessary mistakes have also been made. I will let Americans to evaluate the mistakes of the coalitions in terms of the transition, but certainly from our perspective in Iraq, Iraqi political leaders, and I would not exclude myself, have committed many mistakes, and we are learning from that. And this is an ongoing process.
Well, speaking of transitions, we've had a big one in this country. President Trump has come into office. He's made a lot of changes already. One was a pause on all foreign aid except for Israel and Egypt. He's also suggested that Jordan and Egypt take in the Palestinians. He's saying he wants to, quote, clean out Gaza. What are your first impressions of the Trump presidency?
First and foremost, I would say this is a decision of the American people. They have gone into an elections. They have elected a new leader, and a new administration has come into place. This is, again, I do not want to get involved in domestic American politics, but one thing I would say, we have to take this administration very seriously, and some of the announcements that were made and commitments that were made during the campaign is being delivered upon, and we have to deal with it. Certainly on the issue of suspension of foreign assistance, I have been speaking to some friends both on the Hill as well as in the administration. This is subject to review case by case or country by country, and we hope, because there are so many important programs that are taking place, these should be dealt with. In the case of Iraq, there are many programs that are important, one of which is assistance to educational establishments like the American University of Iraq in Suleimania and other American universities that have rendered an important service. Because of this decision, this has been suspended as part of this freeze, but I'm sure we are being reassured that these will be reviewed and case by case basis will be dealt with. We hope that it will end up being the right decision.
Let me squeeze in a call before we have to take a quick break. Joe is calling from Overland Park, Kansas. Joe, your question for the former president of Iraq.
Yeah, first of all, this is a great honor to speak to President Saleh, and I greatly appreciate the opportunity to ask this question. Considering the Israel-Palestine conflict, the thing that concerns me most is that both sides consider this land to be given to them by God. The Hamas Charter says that it is a gift from God. I can't say the right word, and the Israelis certainly believe they belong there for thousands of years. How do you ever resolve a conflict where both sides think they have God on their side? I don't understand how you can ever get out of that.
That's a
You
great
help me
question,
out.
Joe. Let me take that to the president, Mr. Sala. What do you think?
It's a very profound question. As president, I had the honor of receiving His Holiness the Pope to Baghdad, the first ever visit by a pope to Mesopotamia. He came to Baghdad, and in my remarks to him, welcoming him, I asserted that we are all God's children. And if we were talking about the three major religions, we are all children of Abraham.
Mm-hmm.
Abraham has started in Iraq, in Ur, where the Pope went and had a sermon there and had a service there. Really, I don't think God, if we were to go back to the basic fundamentals of religious values, God does not want his children to be fighting the way we are fighting now. God has not created us to take one another. At the end of the day, the children of Abraham have to come together and have to live in peace and have to end the cycle of violence and turmoil that has beset our part of the world forever. And certainly should not be in the name of God, that God should be seeking, asking us to live in peace and with dignity for all.
That was a big question for us to ask you before the break, but to stand by, Tolliver, the most significant American involvement in the Middle East in the past 25 years was, of course, the Iraq War, which followed the 9/11 attacks, and the George W. Bush administration claimed that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction.
Yeah, which turned out not to be true. Here's former President Bush announcing the start of the conflict back in 2003.
My fellow citizens, at this hour, American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people, and to defend the world from grave danger. On my orders, coalition forces have begun striking selected targets of military importance to undermine Saddam Hussein's ability to wage war. These are opening stages of what will be a broad and concerted campaign.
Tolliver, what are we listening to here?
This is Ahmed Monica with Oh Mother, Baghdadian singer. He's also an award-winning director and actor. Meanwhile, I can barely tie my shoes without falling down. More of your calls coming up on The Middle.
This is The Middle. I'm Jeremy Hobson. If you're just tuning in, The Middle is a national call-in show. We are focused on elevating voices from the middle geographically, politically, and philosophically, or maybe you just want to meet in the middle. This hour, we're taking your questions about the Middle East with former president of Iraq, Barham Saleh, who is now a senior fellow at the Belfer Institute at Harvard University. Tolliver, what is the number to call in?
It's 8444-MIDDLE. That's 844-464-3353. You can also write to us at listentothemiddle.com or on social media.
And before we go back to the phones, Mr. President, there are tens of millions of migrants who are fleeing countries in the Middle East from Syria, Iraq, Egypt, obviously the Palestinian territories. They have gone to places in the region. They've also gone to countries in Europe and to the United States. Do you expect many of them to ever return to their home countries if conditions are safe?
I was an immigrant. I left Iraq in 1979 to the United Kingdom after finishing education. Because of Saddam Hussein's dictatorship, I became a political refugee and then became a citizen. My kids were born there. Of course, my situation may be unique. I went back later on. And many, many other immigrants in Europe, I know for sure, have really made the decision to come back to both the Kurdish region, at least in the time frame of 2007 to 2012 and 13, when the situation stabilized in Iraq, when the economic situations were beginning to boom. Today, I hear many Arab Iraqis are returning back to southern Iraq because the economic conditions are a lot better. Immigration is a long-standing problem across the world. In Europe, it's a problem nowadays, in the United States. And I would say the following. Again, I understand strong debate, the real debate that is going on in every society about the scale of this problem and the impact that it has on these societies. But there is one fundamental factor that we need to remember. Nobody likes to leave their homes to go to a different country. Nowhere is like home. So when we had the conflict in Syria for so many years, and essentially that dynamics was left around, a lot of Syrians left their country as refugees. Now I hear, despite many uncertainties about Syria, which I'm sure we're going to be talking about, many people are returning, whether from Turkey, even from Europe, are returning back to Syria, trying to go back to their homes and rebuild their lives and so on. So one aspect of this immigration challenge that all these Western societies are faced with, at least has to be helping these countries that are the source of the immigration to basically sort out their problems, both whether it is economic, whether it is security and dictatorships and political, because without dealing with the source problem, you will continue to be challenged with these issues that we're talking about today.
Well, let's talk about Syria for a minute, because, well, we're talking about it anyway. Bashar al-Assad was just ousted after a decade-long civil war in Syria. What do you think of the new government in Syria? Do you have hope for that country being a member of the nations of the world?
Jeremy, let me be very direct about this. Number one, Bashar Assad gone is good news for the world. The guy was a dictator, was a brutal.
Used chemical weapons on his own people.
Used chemical weapons on his people, as Saddam did, by the way, in Iraq. Saddam Hussein, he was also a Ba'athist of a different type. But these dictatorial regimes, to the dustbin of history, is a great move, and it's a great opportunity for the Syrian people. The group that has come into Damascus to take over Damascus after Assad has to be disconcerting for the Syrian people first and foremost, but also for the neighbors. Remember, many of these have been part of the Al-Qaeda organization, part of the ISIS organization. And I want to believe what the leader of Syria today, Mr. Shara, is saying. I desperately want him to be true to all his statements and announcements. And we should help him, by the way. The world should help him. The neighborhood should help him deliver on these commitments. But we have to be very, very careful. We have to be very vigilant, and that requires checks and balances. That requires facts on the ground. To this end, I would say Syria is not a monolith. It's not just these Islamists who have come into Damascus. You have Kurds, you have Christians, you have Druze, you have Alawites even, together with so many civil, middle-of-the-road Syrians who want to live in at least quasi-democratic civil state. So it's important to help these elements of Syrian society to be part of this transition, to reclaim their country, and to making sure that we are not putting our aspirations and hopes in just words. We need facts on the ground. Syria and the region cannot afford the resurgence of another terrorist movement, as we have seen with ISIS, that has terrorized Syrians, terrorized Iraqis, terrorized Yazidis, Christians, and terrorized the world.
A lot of people want to ask some questions to you. Let's go to Rizwan, who is in Houston, Texas. Rizwan, welcome to the middle. Go ahead with your question.
Yes. Thank you so much, President Saleh, for this great opportunity. My question was, how do you see now the situation between the different ethnic and religious groups in Iraq? Speaking of the Sunni and Shia, the Kurds, Christian, is there, how is the relationship between these groups? Is there more divisiveness than before in the times of Saddam? And especially given that Syria is now facing such a situation with all its mixed ethnic groups. Just wanted your opinions on that. Thank you.
Rizwan. Thank you, Rizwan. And I think from your name, you probably have connections to our part of the world. So what I will be telling you probably is not so new to you, but let me put it this way. Our part of the world is a diverse community, and we have truly so many identities. It was dictatorship and ethnic nationalism and politicization of religions that we have divided. Kurds, Arabs, Shias, Sunnis, Muslims, Christians, Jews coexisted together in peace and harmony forever. We have had problems, and every region of the world, every corner of the world, including probably in Texas, you may have certain tensions and there. I'm not trying to simplify these things, but what happened in a country like Iraq with the brutal dictatorship that we have witnessed, certainly since 1958 when the military took over, and definitely when Saddam Hussein's brutal dictatorship, using chemical weapons, committing genocide against the Kurds, discriminating against the Shias, discriminating against other communities in the country, that has totally destroyed the country. 2003, things have not been easy since, because Iraq has been also subjected to this horrible onslaught of these jihadi terrorists that has been exploding cars, bombs, killing scores of people day in and day out based on identity. And the politicization of religion has not been helpful to bringing the country together. There is still tension in Iraq among the communities, definitely so. There is definitely a lot of political troubles between the Kurdish parties and the Baghdad-based Arab parties, you name it, on issues of resources, on issues of revenues, security, all of these things. But it is a continuing work of progress. In Syria, the Ba'ath dictatorship of Bashar al-Assad have kept this under wrap for a long, long time, but these divisions were already there because there were discrimination against the Kurds, there were discrimination against Sunnis, against other communities in Syria. Now, with this regime gone, these various communities are coming to the fore and are asking to be partners in their own country. Will they be able to do it easily? Absolutely not, because we're talking about a new dynamics, as we have discovered in Iraq. We all, on the eve of liberation of Iraq, we hope that we will all agree on a concept of a democratic, peaceful Iraq, and that we will live happily ever after. But life is a bit more complicated than that, and there is a lot of legacy of history, culture, political gimmicking, in foreign intervention that makes life difficult. But at the end of the day, we, the people of that region, we have no other option but to working together for the fundamental things. Jobs for our kids, schools for our kids, better quality health service. By the way, the things that you care about in Texas are exactly the things that my constituents in Sulaymaniyah and my constituents in my compatriots in Basra or Qamishlu or Damascus would want as well.
Except for American football, probably. But let's go to another
Well,
question.
actually, we like soccer, by the way. American football is becoming a bit more and more fascinating for people.
Right. Ryan is calling from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, with a question. Ryan, welcome to the middle, and go ahead.
Hey, thank you for taking my call this evening. I have a question regarding your thoughts of if we might have to start considering a newer 21st century model of Middle East peace and sustainability, because for the last century, conflict in the Middle East has been based on religion and land and identity. But now we have climate change coming in, and UNICEF and the World Bank and the UN, they've all warned that as the Middle East is going to be the primary region of the world that is going to be most affected by droughts, lessening of access to fresh water. And I can't help but think that this could bring about an entire new wave of instability in the region as people aren't able to grow crops. They can't even access water. And do we now have to incorporate that there could be conflicts breaking out because people can't even get the most basic things? Do we need sort of a 21st century Middle East peace plan that takes
based
into
on climate
account
change? Yeah, great. We got it, Ryan. Go ahead.
This is a very important and revealing question. And Jeremy, you'll have to allow me to dwell on it, because this is things we can be stuck in the past, or we need to look at how we can solve our challenges of the day and move forward. Climate change and environmental challenges are really so central to the Middle East. And let me tell you about Mesopotamia, the land of the two rivers, where the Garden of Eden was, according to mythologies, of all religions. It was in Iraq. It was where the Tigris and and Euphrates have come together. This is where all the mythology is focused on. Now is turning into desert land, desertification, salination of waters that are coming to the downstream of the rivers are really, really profound in terms of impacting the quality of life of people. Remember, in 2003, Iraq was 28 million people. Today is 45 million people. By 2050, we will be 80 million people. And we simply cannot go on. I'm just talking about Iraq, and we can talk about the entire neighborhood. We simply cannot go on with the present dynamics feeding our people, because agricultural lands are being eroded because of desertification, growth of population, pollution are all impacting us. Water supply cannot suffice the way we are using our water and so on. This applies to Syria, this applies to Iran. Perhaps Turkey may not have that problem in that sense of the word, but Turkey may have other environmental challenges that it will have to deal with. So this challenge, whether we like it or not, whether we like our neighbors or not, whether we will like the other community next door or not, compel us to work together and bring our people together. I have looked at some numbers during my time in office as well as nowadays at the university. That basin, Levant with Turkey and the Gulf and Iran as well, by 2030 or so, or 2030, yeah, it could be home to nearly 500 million people.
Wow, that's unbelievable.
Sorry, by 2050, my figures need to be accurate here. Will be nearly 500 million people. And these people, this growing population will need schools, will need jobs for its kids as they grow into this thing. And it will be a primarily young population. And unless we have a sustained and a smart policy of dealing with these challenges and managing our environmental issues, and especially the conflict over water, because today it's a big issue between Syria and Turkey, between Iraq and Iran, between Iraq and Turkey. This is already a matter of major contention in terms of interstate relations.
Right.
There is no way Iraq or Syria, or for that matter, Turkey and Iran and the Gulf could come together, come and solve these economic issues unless they integrate economically the entire neighborhood. And there are many actually projects that are going on in terms of infrastructure connecting the region to create bigger markets, because we need each other. Without it, cannot happen. And yes, these countries, all of us across the region, we have problems with each other. We have issues of contentions and disputes, but at the same time, we all need jobs for the young population that is coming on the job market. And the scale of our economies today cannot do it without economic integration across the region.
Yeah. Let me squeeze one more call in here before a quick break. Greg is in Chicago. Greg, quickly go ahead for the president.
Hello, Mr.
Go ahead, Greg.
Hello, Mr. President. Hello, Mr. President. Thank you for taking my call. My question is in regards to the notion of Zionism among many right-wing Israelis, and how do Arab nations handle this attitude that the Holy Land needs to be reclaimed, and what are the implications for nations and borders in the future as the U.S. appears to be supporting Zionism in Israel and in that region?
Thank you, Greg. Go ahead, President Saleh.
You are asking a question to a Kurd who has been victimized by history and by colonial powers and was denied a country when they drew these borders. So your question is relevant. I think the most important thing, if we think about the future, we really need to understand coexistence is absolutely vital within the region as a whole. And that requires accepting our diversity, that requires accepting each other, and that also requires renouncing violence and renouncing force as a means of settling our issues together. And because this region cannot go on like this forever. By the way, if you look at Europe, for example, the scale of violence throughout European history, 17th century, 18th century, even 20th century, was far more painful than that of Eastern world.
Yeah.
And
I have to pause you right there, President Saleh, because we do have to hit a short break. But Tolliver, we did hear that clip earlier of George W. Bush announcing the start of the Iraq War. That came about a decade after the first war in the region.
That's right. Here's former President George H.W. Bush speaking to the American public about the start of the Persian Gulf War.
Our objectives are clear. Saddam Hussein's forces will leave Kuwait. The legitimate government of Kuwait will be restored to its rightful place, and Kuwait will once again be free. Iraq will eventually comply with all relevant United Nations resolutions, and then, when peace is restored, it is our hope that Iraq will live as a peaceful and cooperative member of the family of nations.
A reminder, The Middle is available as a podcast in partnership with iHeart Podcasts on the iHeart app or wherever you listen to podcasts. Tolliver, what are we listening to here?
This is Rage Against the Machine. Surprise! The song is called Killing in the Name. I've never heard a band sound so aggressive while advocating for peace. I like that. More of your calls coming up on The Middle.
Those who died, but wearing a badge ain't the chosen white. Some of those that work forces are the same that burn crosses.
This is The Middle. I'm Jeremy Hobson, and we're talking about the Middle East with a very special guest, the former president of Iraq, Barham Saleh. You can call us at 844-4MIDDLE. That's 844-464-3353, or you can reach out at listentothemiddle.com. And let's get right back to the phones because there are a number of callers waiting. Ayelet is with us from Westminster, Colorado. Welcome to The Middle, and go ahead with the former president.
Thank you. It's nice to meet you, former president. My name in Arabic is Ghazala. Both my parents were born in Iraq. And Ana min al-Yahud. I'm Jewish. And in in 1950 and 1951, about 150,000 Jews left Iraq to move to Israel. And by doing so, they needed to leave behind their citizenship, to give up being an Iraqi citizen, and also their entire property, homes, jewelry, everything. And my grandmother, who passed away, unfortunately, dreamt about her house, the house that she had many stories about it. And I wonder if ever the Jews will be allowed to have back their citizenship, the Jews that were born in Iraq, both my parents, or even diplomatic relationship with Israel so we can visit our roots. We were in Iraq for thousands of years.
Ayelet, thank you very much for that question.
Azalia, I come from Kurdistan, and my parents and my grandparents used to tell me a lot about their Jewish neighbors and the life that they had together. And they were very much part of the culture, the society. And even in Baghdad, a lot of the Baghdadi families were talking about their experience and the legacy and the heritage of their Jewish neighbors and their community leaders. And remembering with the start of the Iraqi state, a notable Jewish gentleman was the first minister of finance in the country at the time, quite well known. So there is a lot of history to Jewish life in Iraq. And my hope and the hope of so many that there will be peace in that part of the world, and that these terrible things that have happened will be dealt with justice and with decency for all.
Let's go to Adam, who is in Naples, Florida. Adam, welcome to The Middle. Go ahead.
Hey there. Thanks for having me on. How are you two?
Doing great. Go ahead with your question for the president.
Sure thing. Yeah. Thank you for your excellency's presence. My question is predicated on Palestinian statehood. Obviously, statehood must happen for this drawn out issue to come to an acceptable conclusion and for the dignity of Palestinians to be able to be realized. My question, based on your experience, is a two-state solution even possible at this point, given the given the presence of settlements? And if it's not possible, what does a one-state solution look like in terms of the realistic acceptance of the Knesset to allow this new population, new quote-unquote, with regard to having full and equal voting rights? I don't really see a two-state solution being possible, given that it'll be difficult to evacuate settlements, to connect the Gaza Strip to the West Bank, and also to provide enough water territory for trade and then air territory.
Good question, Adam. Let's take that to the president.
Wallahi, undeniably, there is a lot of debate about this nowadays. And this is a central issue and a crucial issue that has to be dealt with. Palestinians deserve dignity, deserve a place that they can call their state. How to achieve that will have to be through peaceful conversations and renunciation of the kind of violence that we have seen in recent years that have only meant more destruction and more suffering for all, as a matter of fact. But this issue has to be resolved. The exact modality of this has to be worked out by the parties and has to be based on a viable solution that will see to the dignity and security of all in the region.
Let me ask you about Turkey, which I was there back in 2003 at the start of the war, working with NPR's war correspondent there. It's a country that is 99% Muslim, but it's also a country that is part of NATO. It feels very Western in many ways. But just this week, President Erdogan welcomed the leaders of Hamas into the presidential complex. How do you see Turkey's role in what's happening in the Middle East?
Again, Turkey, it's undeniably a very important geopolitical actor, a major power in that part of the world. It's my neighbor in Iraq, as well as a Kurd. I have a direct interest in Turkish policies on all of these issues. I have to say, I have serious issues with Hamas. Hamas, who I've seen supporting Saddam Hussein's dictatorship, supporting some of these ugly elements inside Iraq, trying to destabilize our situation through terrorism and violence. So for me, I have issues, serious issues with Hamas. And I think at the end of the day, Turkey is an important player, certainly after what happened in Syria as well. One has to see to what the Turks are doing. I would hope that Turkey, being a member of NATO, and also with the relations it has with the West and the important projection of power that it has across our part of the world, will be seeking better relations with the neighbors. And certainly in the case of the Kurdish issue, which is a central and important issue to Turkey, I'm a bit more hopeful than before, because there is talk about a peace process with the Kurds of Turkey, vis-a-vis acknowledgement of language and ethnic identity and so on. I hope this will be, as the public speculations that are being stated, would lead to something tangible and end this conflict that has been going on in Turkey for so long as well.
Yeah. Tolliver, I know some comments are coming in online.
Yeah, they're flying in right now. Mr. President, you mentioned the changes in climate change and the problems that presents for future generations, while also mentioning a doubling of population in the next 10 or 20 years or so. Is there anything being said in the public space about the responsibility of population control? I don't know if you wanted to take that one real quick.
Actually, this is, again, a huge debate going on in our societies, because it is also, there are elements about tradition, elements about religiosity, you name it. But we need, I am of the school of thought that our population is growing a lot faster than our countries can sustain it and our economies can sustain it. And we really need to educate people, and we need to go for, but I cannot tell you that is easy, because at one hand, while the economy is expanding, while the revenues and the GDP per capita is improving, you see a lot of people going for larger size families. But it's a challenge. It's a challenge. Many countries in the neighborhood are having that problem, and the burden on the infrastructure, burden in terms of the projected requirement that we will have are going to be huge. As I told you, we are talking about 500 million people in that basin alone, with Egypt and so on included. That is a staggering number, and what will require of us to develop our economies and develop our job markets will be huge.
Jeremy, I want to sneak one more in because I think it's a great question. Vaughn in Fort Worth, Texas says, many of us Americans strongly believe against violence against civilians, no matter who is committing that violence or who is suffering it. In this time of extreme tribalism and with our administration, what can American individuals do to help?
Well, United States, let me tell you this thing. I mean, I'm a student of history, and probably many in the Middle East would like to have a lot easier life than what we have. And I know many in the United States have had enough of being involved in foreign crises and so on. But remember, the United States is an indispensable nation to the rest of the world, and our security and your security are very much intertwined. Your citizens' involvement in being supportive to promoting these values of tolerance, peace, coexistence will be absolutely important. Working with your members of Congress, working with your elected officials to making sure that these basic values of peace, dignity, human rights are really supported. At the end of the day, we live together on the same planet. And as I said, our security and yours are very much intertwined. We will need the continued engagement and the support of the United States on so many things that this part of the world will continue to need your leadership on.
Let's go to Brant, who's in Salt Lake City, Utah. Brant, welcome to the middle, and go ahead with your question.
Hi, yes. So my question, and first of all, thank you for taking the call and the time today, Mr. President. But my question is related to the fall of the Syrian government and what that means for an independent Kurdistan and Rojava. As many people know, there's been a big independent Kurdish movement for decades, and it does span not only Syrian territory, but Turkish, Iraqi, and I believe some others. But what does that fall of the Assad government mean? What does HTS's control of Syria now mean for the ethnic Kurds there? And what do you see as a solution to the question of an independent Kurdish state?
Thank you, Brand. And I'll just note to the president, as you can see, our listeners are very smart. Okay, go ahead.
Of course. No, this is an unbelievable and amazing. Thank you. Well, Rojava, I was speaking to the leader of the Rojava governing entity, General Mazloum Abdi, this afternoon, as a matter of fact. One has to remember the Kurds in Syria have been in the forefront of the fight against ISIS. They have been a bulwark against extremism, and what they have done has been remarkable over so many years. And this was done in large measure because of the partnership with the United States and the forces, American forces that have been stationed in Syria for some years now. Not large numbers, but they were quite instrumental in enabling them and in helping them push back against the extremists. And this is what I said in terms of my response about HTC and others, that the Kurds of Syria and other communities are key part, have to be key parts of the transition in Syria. And without that, I think my fear is that we will have the country hijacked by extremists who could become a problem not only for the Syrian people, but a problem for the rest of the region. There is one fundamental fact. When the Middle East lines were defined in the aftermath of the First World War, the Kurds were denied a homeland. And this problem has been a persistent problem afflicting stability and democratization of that part of the world. We have been victims of genocide with deportations, displacement, and you name it. The Kurds have been the most profound victim of the international order that the Europeans built in the aftermath of the First World War. But the Kurds have been resilient, have stayed in their land, and there can be no stable Middle East without acknowledging the rights of the Kurdish people. And the more repression, the more adamant the Kurds are about their identity and their place. I think some of these dictatorships in our part of the world are pushing the Kurds to having no option but to have their own separate homeland one way or the other, sooner or later. My hope is that the Kurds in the region will be able to integrate within their own societies, recognize their own identities and their own self-government based on a confederal arrangement, based on a federal arrangement, the way that we have in Iraq with some developments. But the Kurds are key corners for regional stability, and there can be no future for the Middle East without acknowledgement of Kurdish rights.
Okay, we are
Remember,
running out of time.
Kurds are about at least a minimum of 40 million people in that neighborhood, straddling the borders of those two countries.
I have two questions for you before we go, though. One of them is President Biden, a former President Biden now, on his way out the door, said that he thought that Iran was in the weakest position it has been in decades. Do you agree with that?
I think Iran has undoubtedly suffered a huge setback both in Syria and in Lebanon, and also the economic hardships that the Iranian economy is experiencing. But Iran is a major geopolitical actor in our neighborhood and will undoubtedly still be a factor. And I hope that the neighborhood can come together and really solve some of these problems based, again, on international law, renouncing terrorism, renouncing intervention in the affairs of others, and act as normal states, period. Enough of this mess. Enough of this mess. It has been so many years, so many decades in which so many innocent lives have been just wasted for futile wars. Enough of this.
Do you see Saudi Arabia right now as a good force in the region? They've obviously got a close
I was in
relationship
Saudi
with
Arabia,
President Trump.
Jeremy, about a month ago, and I have not been in Riyadh for about probably 6 years, and I was amazed at what I saw in terms of the economic regeneration, about the openness of the society. Remember, there were so many decades in which the people of the region, and for that matter, the world as well, have come to identify Saudi Arabia with the most orthodox, most conservative, even support for some of these Salafi and jihadi movements that were coming from different parts and so on. For Saudi Arabia to normalize its society and to move towards this modernization and economic regeneration and social openness is really a very, very important statement. And we all have a stake in the success of Saudi Arabia, I would say.
Okay, I just have about 10 seconds here, but if you had a chance to talk to President Trump about how he should approach the Middle East right now, what would be your one line that you would tell him?
America is an indispensable nation to the stability and the security of the Middle East. It won't go away. You will be engaged. We need to partner with the good forces in the region to making sure the region is different from its past. And the opportunity is here now.
Well, thank you so much, former President of Iraq, Barham Saleh, for joining us on The Middle. It's been such a treat to have you on the show.
Thank you, Jeremy. You're most kind. Thank you for your listeners.
Thank you. And next week, we're taking on another important topic as California starts to rebuild after the wildfires. Are you prepared for the next natural disaster? We'll be joined by CNN Chief Climate Correspondent Bill Weir and Kim Cobb, who's the director of Brown University's Institute for Environment and Society.
As always, you can call in at 8444-MIDDLE. That's 844-464-3353. Or you can reach out at listentothemiddle.com, where you can also sign up for our free weekly newsletter. And don't forget to check out our new video podcast on YouTube, where you can watch us as well as hear us. And we look good.
And sometimes you can see, Tolliver, how we look when callers get a little crazy. You can see that on the YouTube. You can't hear it on the radio.
Signals.
Right, yeah. The Middle is brought to you by Long Nook Media, distributed by Illinois Public Media in Urbana, Illinois, and produced by Harrison Patino, Danny Alexander, Sam Burmistaz, John Barth, Annika Deschler, and Brandon Kondritz. Our technical director is Jason Croft. Thanks to our satellite radio listeners, our podcast audience, and the more than 420 public radio stations that are making it possible for people across the country to listen to The Middle and talk to world leaders. I'm Jeremy Hobson, and I'll talk to you next week.